Hello and welcome to the Film Angle podcast. I'm Alex.
And I'm Kris.
And today we are talking about two very similar films, maybe, would you say, Kris? Almost one at the start of its journey that follows a similar vein to the one that is now at the end of its journey, just in two very different genres, one being fantasy and one being sci-fi. Would you say that was a fair comparison?
I would say actually it is a very fair comparison. I think the commonality that both of these films share is that they're about friendship.
Friendship and humor and being a team and a family and
maybe a tear-jerky moment here and then.
Absolutely. Yes, they are both very good. And the two films we're going to be talking about today are Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves and the final installment of the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which we'll get into later on, but I think we'll be both agree here that we're both surprised by what came out, or certainly I was, but we'll leave that till later on.
On which one? On which one in particular? Dungeons and Dragons or Guardians?
I think there's element of surprise with both of these.
Yeah, I can see that.
If we go back a few months.
I can see that. Maybe less surprised with Guardians, just because I have a love for that. Those films.
Oh, of course.
Particularly the first.
And I think they are definitely like Marvel's safest pair of hands, really, in terms of characters and setting. I think that they started off with something really good, and that's an easy sort of bar to kind of continue on because they established those characters so well. And
which is mad, because they are the most unknown. They were the biggest risk when they were first launched. Like, does anybody want to see a Marvel film about characters that 90% of the audience base doesn't know, and it's set not on Earth? Just anyway, we're going to talk about Guardians later.
Yeah.
We're going to get into Dungeons and Dragons, the movie based on a board game that has been famous for years and years and years and years and years and years.
Spin-offs of video games.
One unsuccessful movie adaptation, which I haven't seen.
Me neither. It's a TV film. I think it came out, was it the late 90s? I'm unsure of the specific year, but yeah, I heard it wasn't really well received at all.
Yeah, that's what I heard. We might be wrong on that one. But for me, I don't know about you, Kris, but I've never played D&D. And I think that's maybe just because growing up, the friendship groups that I were in never played it themselves. And I kind of look at it from afar, being like, I bet I would be really into that. But I think I was like the nerd of the group, but nobody else was the nerd so much a lot of the times.
Sure. When we were still in secondary school, high school, depending on where you're from, I think the term nerd was still like just pre 2008 when Marvel was starting to come into the scene, and the term of nerd was going to actually not become such a negative term anymore. Playing something like Dungeons and Dragons was still sort of considered to be social suicide.
Yes.
Back in those days. But now it's completely turned around. I mean, with the whole sensation of certainly Stranger Things, that's really like sort of catapulted the popularity of this game, and people who wouldn't usually have sought that sort of thing out are kind of going out their way to play it now. I actually do have an unopened starter pack of Dungeons and Dragons somewhere in my house, as well as a booster pack. I have the intention of getting into it one day, but it's just so time consuming, isn't it? I love the idea of it. I wish I had that sort of like idyllic friendship group where we all went down to someone's parents' basement once a week with a lamplight on and just started like charging into battle with each other. That's it's kind of a fantasy of mine, but it's a time consuming thing. But I mean, we've now got a movie to settle that curiosity.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, as adaptations go, I don't know how much it follows. I did go into this wondering if there was going to be like like in the Lego movie where there's a pull back the curtains and really there's some guys throwing dice along a table and stuff like that. I wondered if we were going to get that, but I think the film very early on goes, no, this is a fantasy film, and we are fully committed to that. as well as being a comedy at the same time.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, this is like we kind of alluded to the other week. I mentioned that this was written by Jonathan Goldstein, John Francis Daly, and Michael Gillo. These guys were really. These guys wrote the Game Night film that came out a few years ago, which was a big hit comedy that we really enjoyed. Um, so there's still that sort of like level of humor in here, and I actually probably laughed more at Dungeons and Dragons on Among Thieves than I did at Game Night. And that's saying something, because I love Game Night, and that is a movie that kind of came out of nowhere too, and that should have probably been another run of the mill shrug off film that ended up being pretty hilarious.
Yeah.
So lightning strikes twice here, it seems.
Yeah, like you alluded to last week, which kind of sold me on actually getting into the cinema and watching the film. The film's directed by John Francis Daly and Jonathan M. Goldstein, who are the guys behind probably one of the best comedies of recent years, which was Game Night. So, I mean, I didn't really know that until recently, I think. I wasn't really following the kind of production of Dungeons and Dragons. It wasn't something on my radar so much. The only thing it had going for it was like Chris Pine was in it, and I like Chris Pine a lot. But
Yeah.
those guys coming into the folds really kind of helped boost this film. And I think it does take a lot of its inspiration from the original Guardians of the Galaxy. You're putting a team of rogues together
Mm.
who decide to do something for the greater good, which is against their usual nature,
Oh yeah.
um, and almost form a small little family. And there's a lot of humor and tears shed along the way. Um, Casting wise, I think it's a pretty good cast, and
I think it's a
Chris
great
Pine's
cast.
one of my favorite Chris's, most underrated Chris, I think.
Definitely the most underrated Chris. I would say, would say he is my favorite Chris off the little I have seen him in. I think he just throws himself into whatever he's doing. There, even if he's doing something, if he's playing a, you know, maybe smart but sort of goofy character, he puts a level of intelligence into the acting all the time. There's always like layering going on, and he puts a lot of ingenuity into timing those laughs and just being a really likable leader type role. Like I mentioned, he really kind of is borrowing from that Kirk persona that he kind of manifested in the Star Trek movies. Yeah, that's fully formed again here, and he's just sort of the linchpin keeping together a really really good group. I mean, he's not by any means the thing keeping it together. Everybody gets their moment to shine in this movie, which is really good considering how many characters there are. They managed to find enough, emotion and sort of structure for all of them to kind of have their free arc sort of, um, their arcs are complete by the end of this movie.
Yeah, I think the one that surprised me the most was Michelle Rodriguez, and
She's great.
as I don't always get excited when I see that Michelle Rodriguez is in a film, and this has nothing to do with her. I think she's a good
She's great.
actress.
Yeah, yeah.
She's just very much cast as the,
The heavy.
as the heavy, gotta be, the girl who can do it like the guys, kind of character that she's played previously. But they really gave they did that here. There's no doubt about that. They did that, but there's a softness to her character, and it's kind of one of the big emotional beats near the end of the film that kind of really um, uses that strength of her character's arc. And then other people, Hugh Grant, just full on hamming it up. He's having a great time at the moment,
He
old Hugh
is having
Grant,
a good.
isn't it?
Yeah.
He's having a good
Um,
time.
he's one of those like I don't even know if it was for comedic purpose, but when he's first introduced in this film, via like a backflash, and he's got this long withered ponytail hair, and he's riding off in a carriage, even though he's playing it really sincerely, you just can't help but laugh because you know exactly where this character is going to go. Yeah, he's so good at hamming it up and being both really likable and deliciously evil, but also just being like you just can't he hit the guy at the same time, but you can't help but laugh at every scene that he's in. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, he's great. I think he's found a really good rhythm, and self awareness within his acting career within the last sort of 5 years, ever since Paddington 2 came along. And it's worth mentioning Paddington 2 because, you know, he's completely he's doing the same character again here, which is not a bad thing whatsoever.
No, no, absolutely not. And then obviously the kind of the mastermind, the true mastermind villain behind all of this. I think this is the person who surprised me maybe the most of
Oh,
all the cast, mainly because I didn't know who she was, which was Daisy Head, who plays is it Sophina
oh
she's like a red
yes,
witch
yeah, the Red
or a
Witch,
red
yes,
sorcerer.
yes.
Yeah, I thought she was really good. Now, obviously, her character is probably a little one note. Like you are the
She's the
evil
least
villain.
probably developed part of the film, yeah. But I
She
mean, she
is,
doesn't need to be that developed, I suppose.
but for like a relatively unknown person, just playing the villain of a pretty big blockbuster film, um, I thought she was very menacing and
Yeah.
really interesting. She looks the part for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure. She's got these sort of like piercing, big, bulgy eyes that are kind of like always thinking. But even though her character has to be very silent and very methodical and waiting her time always, you know, she's the main villain, kind of using Hugh Grant's character as a sort of like sort of as a stepping stone to get where she wants to go, and she's meanwhile acting as his servant until her time comes and biting her tongue, and she does that stuff really, really well. You know what's going to come is going to be something big, and you just have to wait for it. Um, what I was really, really impressed with this film as well, that I think, you know, even Marvel struggling to get right. I know we'll be talking about that later, is action. I was really surprised by how kinetic and how well done the rhythm of the action was done. You know, there was, especially Michelle Rodriguez, whenever she's like fighting like 10 guys in suits of armor in a really tight enclosed environment. There's real inventiveness and really well edited scenes where I can see exactly what's going on in the action. You know, it's better than it needs to be. It really, really is. I was really surprised. Almost had this like sort of Matrix quality to the action scenes at times, that very well choreographed, and yeah, there was a lot of humor and thought put behind those too. I was impressed by that.
Yeah, but the camera work and the
Mm,
um, choreography of each scene like really lends itself to each character that they're portraying. So like you really get the idea of
very
Michelle
true.
Rodriguez's strength when you have I can't remember the name of the character who turns into different animal
Oh,
creatures.
Doric, I think. Yes,
Yeah, I mean, there's a brilliant scene where it's almost like one take of her running towards the camera,
love it.
changing into these different animals as she goes. Like, there's some really creative scenes, which obviously really showcase the different kind of powers and
Mm.
abilities
When they
on
break
board.
into the carriage, they create the whole portal in the bottom of the carriage, and then the camera kind of does the swift thing where she goes into the portal, and your perspective shifts, and it does a 180-degree camera shot, kind of like the Matrix. I thought that was really cool as well.
Yeah, can we talk about the whole portal thing because it was cool and I liked it, but the way they get that um, magic staff that does it is kind of like, oh, it's just been in my bag the whole time. I, I was like, oh, come on, guys. That's a bit lazy. I think there were a few times in this film where the story was like, how do we get out of this? We do it like this now. And I think there's a bit at the end where all the kind of plans that go wrong actually all inform each other into one big good plan.
Yeah,
And I liked that, but I
yeah.
think along the way, some of that kind of like,
it it, it
whoops, we
def
messed that up, and that got a bit tiring at times. If I was to make a criticism here,
Okay, okay, I can see that. I think this is definitely Fetch Quest the movie, but I think that's exactly at the same time it's trying to be a standalone fantasy movie that could have came out 20 years ago, but also it is like an adaptation of a board game, right? You know, it's kind of board game, video game logic is within this as well. But I didn't find it tiring. I thought the set pieces, you know, there was so much jam packed in this through the comedy sequences and just the environments that are on display, and like just spending time with these characters, that I didn't really want to leave this world. You know, the more it gave me, the more grateful I was, which is, you know, that's not something you can say about a lot of films. You know, I find this thing this whole entity of this Dungeons and Dragons film to be a complete breath of fresh air. You know, we're so bogged down with self-evaluating everything that's going on in the world today within our films. So it's really nice to have something that's completely separated from anything to do with that. Even our big
Yeah.
blockbuster movies, you know, tend to have less some sort of undertone or comment on current society, and this is completely devoid of all that. You know, I really appreciate it. I thought, you know, there would be, when you watch like a modern Simpsons episode, it can't help but rely on our own times to kind of find the laughs. And they came up with a way of just serving up a straight up story that made me forget about everything that was going on adjacent to outside of this cinema room, um, and just kind of be wrapped up in this world. And I just didn't want to leave. I know if they wanted to make another Dungeons and Dragons movie again with the same guys, I would be straight up front of the line for this thing.
Yeah, and I think it did well enough that you got to hope that they will, because I think that's the one thing that, well, not the one thing, but one of many things this film does right is kind of set up these characters as an interesting group to follow. You're in a fantasy world where, you know, you've seen a smidgen of it, but it does seem like anything is
Mm-hmm.
possible. We can go to some kind of really wacky lands and kingdoms, and you know, the same kind, like, because I know we're about to speak about Guardians, but the same kind of thing that Guardians set up in the first film, of like, we're in a different area of the Marvel universe now. We could just make up planets and they have weird and wacky things, and you know, fun ensues, and each character reacts to those things differently, and that's the
Yeah.
fun of it, and that's where the comedy comes into play. Yeah, so I think this film does a very good thing. I like, you know, if I was to compare it to the first Guardians, I don't think it's as good. I don't think all the comedy lands. I think it's a funny film, but I don't think it was like the funniest film
I get
I've
it.
ever
I
seen.
get it.
Like, but to be fair, I saw it quite late in the day, and you know, it's been out for over a month, I think now, but my cinema was still relatively packed to see it, so that made me happy, and there was definitely a few chuckles, but I wouldn't say there was like any belly
I
laughing.
I, I I was kind of I'm different, I suppose. I was belly laughing for this whole every joke.
Comedy's
I
subjective. Comedy is subjective, you know.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It tickled me a lot. This film. I think the stuff that I kind of picked up from everybody else in the audience. There's a scene where they have to reanimate the dead corpses
Oh,
at a graveyard, and
standout.
there was a I could hear laughter in that scene. It's pretty good. It was like it's very video gamey where they want to find out some information, and they go to an old battleground where all these fallen soldiers have been laid to rest, and they dig up each individual grave to ask questions to get to their answer, and they can only ask each corpse one question or three questions at a time, isn't it? And
Ooh, five. For
oh,
some reason, I'm thinking five.
right. Okay. Yeah. It's they can only ask a certain number of questions, but if they don't ask all of the questions, the corpse still stays animated and alive until the end of
Yeah,
the questionnaire ends. So you can imagine there's a lot of funny things that happen there. Yeah.
yeah.
That's great. That stuff.
That's the standout comedy section for me. I was laughing a lot during that scene in particular. That was great.
We
Um,
even have a post
just
credit scene with that features one of those characters as well, which is great.
Oh, okay. I didn't stay for the credits.
Oh,
I w-
you should have, man.
I w- I Yeah. Okay. What happens in the post credits?
It's just one of those the one animated corpse that they forgot to ask the last question to is still by himself, and he's having a sing song by himself. It's pretty
Oh, nice.
good.
Okay, I'll have to like seek it out on YouTube or something and give it a watch. Um, to kind of summarize this film, I thought it'd be interesting. So my fiance Emma is she's a tough cookie to please on films, and fantasy is her least favorite genre. And I took
Oh,
her along to Dungeons and Dragons, which she was getting very tired of the trailer that's been playing for like the last few months in the cinema of it, and she very much enjoyed it. So if
That's
that's a
good.
review, if that's something to go off, then there you
That
go. She's
I think this is going to please a lot of people. I don't feel, I feel like I feel like you are a very very tough cookie if this doesn't like at least make you laugh a couple of times, or
yeah,
I think, and it's sweet at the end. You love all the characters. You're sad to see them go. Um, it's worth saying I'm a bit biased. It's all mostly shot in Northern Ireland, which I like to
yes.
see, and those environments do look pretty good.
They do.
um,
It felt like there were real sets and there were real
yeah,
locations. Like that is one thing that it shouldn't feel like, oh great, because that's just how film should be made. But I feel like after a few kind of uh dodgy blockbusters, Ant-Man, that was a breath of fresh air that it just
I need
felt
to
like
reevaluate that.
you could touch a lot of the things. I just
Hmm.
felt like, I could touch the grass they were sitting on or touch the
Yeah,
stone
it's a very
walls.
green movie, which is nice.
Yeah, just felt real, which was nice. I liked that. I like that. Good old Northern Ireland.
That's absolutely represent. Shot in my hometown, a lot of it too, actually.
I remember you saying when we were there, but we
Yeah.
couldn't get to any of it because it's all private
Eh,
estate or something,
it-
right?
yeah, anytime in the movie where you see like outdoor courtyard scenes with like those nice gravel paths and everything, where people are like the small town settlings, I think that's some banger. Yeah.
Nice. There you go.
There
There
you
you
go.
go. Full of knowledge. Shall we move on to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3?
Oh no, you're itching to talk about this.
Why? Have you got anything else to say about Dungeons and Dragons?
Oh no, no, it's great. Go out your way to see it. I think it drops. I think it's on VOD really, really soon. So you
Yeah,
can't
I
you kind
think
of
it is
caught up
in the
with it.
States. I think it's
Mm.
in the States right now, which means it'll be
I think it's
VOD here
14th of
probably pretty
May.
soon.
Yeah, 14th of May.
Yeah.
It's on VOD.
So if you missed it in the cinema, go ahead and watch it on VOD. Guardians, though, shall we?
Yeah, absolutely.
Shall we? I was just going to say, I think there were maybe some minor spoilers when we were talking about Dungeons and Dragons there, but nothing that completely spoils the film. I know Chris, you mentioned post credit, but I think that's fine. I think maybe we just like give our non spoiler thoughts for like a quick minute because I think this film's very hard to talk about without spoiling it because they're pretty much spoilers from the get go of this film,
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
fun of this film is from maybe what doesn't happen and all that kind of stuff. So, if you haven't seen Guardians, Chris, just give me a lowdown. Should people go see it? Non spoiler thoughts first.
I think if you are somebody who's completely, overused word, but it's the right word, fatigued with the Marvel Universe, the MCU, you're you think that there's nothing left to come back to, well, you might be worth checking this out because I think I was in that position too. And I came into this with sort of no build up. I only watched the trailer like 2 or 3 days ago, and I came out of this thing just like full of warmth. you know, I can't remember the last time I came out of a Marvel movie with a spring in my step. This is really good. This is worth seeing.
Yeah, James Gunn has created the perfect kind of cap off to the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy in the most kind of surprisingly disturbing way possible. Um, it is quite a hard 12A,
Yeah, it
but
definitely
it's
is.
brilliant. It's funny and it's very emotional. James Gunn's going to be missed, but DC have found themselves somebody who is a very very capable writer and director who truly knows his
Oh
characters.
yeah,
So I definitely highly recommend as well. Let's move into
you're
spoilers.
being warned. Yeah, you've had your
You've
breathing
had
space.
Yeah, don't listen to the rest of this podcast if you don't want to know what happens. With spoilers from the start. So Chris, here we go. The story of the film is essentially Adam Warlock runs into nowhere.
Oh,
The place where they're going uh, is trying to steal Rocket Raccoon. Um, gets thwarted by the Guardians, but not without leaving Rocket in a way that looks like he potentially might die, which then leads our characters on a quest to find out how to save Rocket,
Yeah,
essentially, which explores a lot of his past and how he came to be. The marketing for this film, can I just say from the start, excellent, because the trailer did not really show you what was going to happen,
yeah,
but it told you it was going to be a pretty emotional ride. All the actors coming out saying like this is the last time we're doing it. James Gunn's been saying like, Kevin Feige said I could do whatever I wanted to these characters. I could kill off whoever I want. I don't know about you, but I went into this film going, somebody's going to die. I even had
yeah,
bets on who was
yeah,
going to die. I said to Em, I thought it was going to be three of the Guardians. I thought it was going to be Drax. I thought it was going to be Nebula. And I thought it was going to be Rocket. And I said, like, those are the
yeah,
three that are dying. I think the biggest surprise of this film is that nobody dies.
yeah. Which I think is the right choice. Yeah,
Yes, and yeah, but you don't. I don't know if I like. I didn't. It isn't until you get to the end of the movie that you're like, yeah, the stakes were so high. I'm so happy nobody died.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but it did feel like the first Marvel movie where it felt like they could kill anyone, and then subsequently did not kill anyone. um, a lot of the time, you're like, they're not going to kill anyone, and they don't kill anyone, or they kill someone and bring them back. This was just like, I think they're going to kill someone. Oh my god, they didn't kill anyone.
yeah.
I'm happy about that.
Yeah, it's hard. It's horrible too because I think 2/3 of the way, and I didn't think about that during the whole movie actually, which is strange. But by 2/3 into it, I was like, they're gonna like kill off Drax or something like that. The stakes are so high, and we're spending so much time actually fleshing out these characters in the midst of this action that it's like we're getting ready to say goodbye to somebody. But yeah, this movie doesn't throw any punches, does it? I mean, this is like, this is probably the most triggering Marvel film, especially if you're a real, animal lover. Any animal activists out there are probably going to find some really hard stuff to deal with in this film that you're forced to watch and endure. All builds towards a really cathartic and very meaningful story for Rocket's origin and his rescue story. But it's hard to sit through sometimes. I think I could see a few glassy eyes around the place.
Oh yeah, 100%, 100%. The animal cruelty is yeah, it's a difficult sell because they show a lot of stuff and they build up a lot of characters to then like new characters to then kind of take them off in pretty cruel ways. Um,
And they're so cute as well.
Exactly. You see some pretty disgusting stuff.
Oh,
I was so surprised this was a 12. Like so
I know.
surprised they were able to get this past because you even had Marvel's first F bomb. So,
Yes.
that matched with the disgusting stuff you see, beheadings, animal cruelty, ripped off faces,
Mm,
like the kind of emotional stakes that are at place because it gets pretty dark and deeper. Like you almost lose Drax, you almost lose Rocket, which is probably the most emotional scene of the film, and you almost lose Peter Quill in a strange turn of events, which makes you think, oh my god,
yeah.
are they actually going to do it? But don't. Um, which is an interesting choice, but kind of just led into that. Like, I think they might because they could,
Yeah.
but yeah, you're still happy that it doesn't happen.
Yeah, absolutely. What did you think about our villain this time? Because villains are a bit hit and miss in Marvel. Um, I I can well, I don't know what you thought about him, the High Evolutionary, this guy who's obsessed with the vanity of perfecting everything around him, trying to create these sort of like omega universes where these planets where perfect specimens can live and operate and function in perfect ways where they don't get sick, they have high, they don't get tired, they can function on the highest level possible. I thought,
Hmm.
although he was, that is quite a one-dimensional desire for a villain, I thought this actor Chukwudi Iwuji, he was incredible. I thought he chewed up the scenery in such a way that you just absolutely hated this guy's guts. I really, it was almost like that sort of Game of Thrones love to hate Joffrey sort of thing, where you saw a character you absolutely just detest, but we're looking forward to seeing on screen at the same time. The makeup on him with the obviously the backflashes with Rocket, you see that his skin and his face is still on, and he looks like a normal sort of humanoid human being, but in the current scenes, he's got this like sort of pulled back, sort of Kenneth
Like
Brockman, sort of
RoboCop.
like
Yeah, like RoboCop tight skin
yes, yeah,
attached to a mask kind
which
of
is
thing.
fascinating just to look at. Such an ingenious piece of makeup by itself. I love that.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I thought he was brilliant. So he was in James Gunn's Peacemaker series, and he was really brilliant in that. But here, oh man, what a performance! I thought he was incredibly, um, just tantalizing to watch on screen.
Yeah,
Because he's so unnecessarily cruel and
yeah,
evil. That
unpredictable as well.
unpredictable, and you don't get much of like, oh, how he came to be and why he's like this and stuff like that, but I kind of liked that because
Yeah,
you get his origin through Rocket's origin, and you don't want to humanize this guy. The
well,
guy's just a dick,
they
you
kind of
know.
make a joke. They kind of make a joke about their Marvel films and their villains in a way in this, because there is a moment where this guy, the High Evolutionary, is about to tell his origin story, and Star Lord Chris Pratt just kind of like says what the audience wants to say and groans and goes, "Oh, yeah, yeah, your mommy didn't love you," or something like that. We've heard this a million times before, and that was great. That was great. I quite enjoyed that self awareness, because do we really need another lofty villain with these burdens? It's hard to justify somebody who does that to animals, though. I kind of emotionally attached to anybody like that. I hope the rest of the audience felt that way too, but like you see Rocket's friends that he meets on this, well, when he's at this facility, and you get these mutilated otters and walruses, and a bunny rabbit that's got no functioning limbs and has spider legs, and it's like, but they're the sweetest, kindest little creatures in the world, and they're all just like a lovely group of friends with the naivety of being able, their master letting them escape and living in this perfect society where they get to be happy, and they're completely clinging on to that dream, and it's just, we know where it's going to go, and
Mhm.
it's completely emotionally manipulative. James
Oh
Gunn knows
yeah,
what he's doing here, but I don't care. I really don't care. I call me manipulated here because it worked, and that, in a way, that's what cinema is all about. You know,
yeah.
um, I thought they did a great job here. It worked for me because it was such a different tone for a Marvel film. It does feel like its own thing. It feels connected to Volume 1 and 2, but especially coming off the back of Volume 2, this feels like it's like something, a different sort of creature from the rest of those two films.
Yeah, it was the epic conclusion that was needed. I feel like Volume 2, its strength was in its comedy, not so much its
Yeah,
story.
the
Um,
ego Kurt Russell stuff just did not work for me.
yeah, I mean, for me, I'm not like, it does work. I
Mm,
must say, on my first watch of Volume 2, I didn't like it. Subsequent rewatches, I've enjoyed it a lot more. Maybe just because you don't have the um, volume one was so good. I'll tell you. So I saw volume one in America with my parents. We were
right.
on a California road trip, and this was obviously back in 2014. It was the opening week of Guardians. Huge Marvel nerd. I had to go see it as soon as, and my parents were like, "Oh man, why are you dragging us to the cinema? Like to watch a stupid film about a talking tree and a talking raccoon? That's stupid." And I was like, "No, it's gonna be great. It's Marvel. It's Marvel." Went to see it, absolutely loved it. Obviously, American audiences in cinemas are a lot different than they are in the UK. They're whooping and hollering, and the bit where Groot says "We are Groot," the whole place like ruptured into cheers and claps, and honestly, it was an amazing
Right.
experience. And I that's a Guardians of the Galaxy one perfect film for me. I think it's 5 stars. I think it's absolutely brilliant, and my parents adored it. They're honestly one of their favorite films. They even saw Guardians 3 yesterday, which was the second day of opening. So, they were hot on
Oh,
Volume 3 as
sweet.
well. So, it holds a big place in my heart. So the expectations for 2 were high. Expectations for 3 were like, I thought the Christmas special was really nice. I really liked that. We've obviously had a much longer wait because James Gunn was booted off the project for some tweets, but then Disney brought him back because the tweets weren't, you know,
Sure.
weren't career breaking tweets. They're a bit stupid, but they weren't career breaking tweets. So it was good to see that he finally could conclude these films, but we are off a bit of a Marvel run that's been a bit weaker than usual. So
Yeah.
all these things played into like middling expectations, I would say. And I was very happy with 3. I think it's the second best one. I don't think it reaches the heights of the first. I think it's a bit iffy in the start. I think some of the Adam Warlock stuff doesn't fully work.
I
The
like I do really like Adam Warlock in this. I mean, you probably have a bit more knowledge than me.
mm,
But I enjoyed Will Poulter in this role. I do think he is a very talented, very likable actor. I do think he's a bit underdeveloped. I think they're just kind of sowing the seeds for something later to
oh
come
yeah,
here
oh
for
yeah,
sure. But yeah, he was fun as a sort of like adult baby coming into the
yeah.
scene every so often, kind of throwing a spanner in the works. I've seen the kind of argument from other critics and other users online, sort of stating that there's too many characters in here. That the movie kind of struggles and buckles under that. I didn't really find it that I've had
No,
a lot. There's been a lot of Marvel movies that had way more side characters than this, and the side characters that there are here, they don't really have a plot line. They're more just there as a scenery, or adding in a little bit of extra character to
yeah,
the to support our main characters, really. So that's not something I really agree with here. But I find maybe, I don't know what did not work about this movie. I suppose that it does kind of struggle. I don't know. I find a lot of this movie actually just really worked for me. Similar to what we talked about earlier with Dungeons and Dragons, there are issues. There are moments where it's kind of trying to move things along too quickly, or the pacing can be a little bit meandering. But again, I was just really surprised by how much I was enjoying spending time with these guys. That those 2.5 hours did not feel like 2.5 hours, which I can't say for even movies that from the Marvel universe that are 2 hours long that feel way longer than this. I was just having an absolute ball. And coming into the sort of second half of the movie, I was so eager to find out what happened to Rocket's story. I wanted to see justice for the Guardians. I was really enjoying Peter Quill's plot line with Gamora. I think this is actually probably one of the better Chris Pratt performances to date.
I wanted to say something about that. I
It's
think it's
very,
his
very good.
I think it's his best one. I mean, a lot of hate kind of gets thrown at Chris Pratt for various reasons, but
Outside of,
I
yeah,
do
go on.
think Peter Quill is. I couldn't. I wouldn't want to see anybody else playing him. I think Chris Pratt does a brilliant job.
Mhm.
Watching Volume 2 recently, I didn't think his performance was like amazing in Volume 2, but Volume 3, I thought this was his strongest performance I've seen from him in a film yet.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I was kind of surprised straight on off the bat. He's kind of in this sort of grieving state at the beginning whenever we get this really kind of memorable opening scene that focuses on Rocket and the adjacent guardians around him. They're in this sort of mourning state post sort of post end game, with and in the background we've got Radiohead's Freak playing in the background, which is really, really kind of it kind of cements the movie's tone really, really early,
Yeah,
very well.
a little too on the nose as a song choice. I thought it was a little on the nose.
For Rocket, I guess it kind of is a good stepping stone for where his story is kind of gonna go. Um, Yeah, because I think they needed to do that. I think if they went into his story out of nowhere, it would have felt a bit like, oh, we're doing this. I think it kind of warms you up into that story pretty well.
Yeah,
But Quill and Chris Pratt just plays it really, really well. I think he manages to still have that naive, boyish charm, but also just be somebody. He's kind of like a really positive person who's kind of sad. He plays that really well without trying to show that he's sad to other people. He's really, really good at this. I
Yeah.
think he just really measures every scene perfectly and plays off people really well. Maybe what didn't work for me is the Gamora stuff. At times, I feel like, maybe that was a bit emotionally cruel to the Quill character, to have that sort of plot line develop, and and just kind of maybe there's potential for somewhere for that to go in the future, wherever these two characters kind of leave. But maybe there's not, and it just seems like a really cruel thing to do to this guy.
I thought it showed growth for him by the end of the film though, because it didn't go down the route of like, oh yeah, she just falls back in love with him. Like obviously there's
Yeah,
like the
yeah,
odd look where it's like, something could happen. I think there's an understanding from Gamora by the end of the film, like, oh, I can see why this other version of me did fall
but
for this guy. But like they really play up the scenes where she's hugging the Ravagers at the end. She's got a different family. She's a different Gamora. She's had different experiences. And I like the fact that you saw Peter come to that conclusion as well. And
hmm.
he was playing through the kind of pain that he felt in Infinity War and Endgame, and I think it would be unfair. And I think he realized how unfair it was to try and force her into something that she's not. So I thought that went down a route that I didn't expect. I did think they might have just been like, oh, by the end of the film they're in love again, and it doesn't, nothing matters. Um, but yeah, that was me. My biggest criticisms were the start with the just because I thought I wasn't getting fully into it in the start. And then I did think that some of the needle drops in this film, some of them are amazing.
I think some are good.
Some of the needle drops didn't work when you just had this emotional moment, and the next thing you've got is like another rock song, you know, playing,
Yeah,
and there were, I think it was only twice, I can't remember the exact moments, but there was twice where I was like, it feels that doesn't work for me. um the comedy was still there, but this was probably the least funny Guardians film, but I guess when you the subject matter is not as humorous potentially, so there's that. But I did think that like there are some really really funny moments, and it's funnier than most kind of blockbuster films. But yeah, not every joke landed for me this time. And then the other thing was, and this is kind of tiny in the small scheme of things, but
hmm,
the mid credits scene where Rocket is leading his own Guardians of the Galaxy team. You've seen all this stuff with animals, and then trying not to, like saving
yeah,
all these animals, and
yeah,
then the
yeah.
alien race that they're about to fight, defend, another tribe on this planet, is a very animal looking alien race, and I just wonder what the thought process was there. I just thought like, could you have made them maybe slightly more humanoid? Like
Yeah,
they just looked very animally, and I was like, oh, I feel like that kind of contradicts. I want to
kind of
know what
makes
the choice was there.
doesn't Gunn as a filmmaker in that scene kind of make a point of it though, doesn't he? I mean, like you get a perspective shot from Rocket look kind of closing in and visualizing them as animals, and then kind of shrugs it off and then goes in, which is quite, which is yeah, I find that quite interesting too. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, you could have went for something a bit more generic for that scene, for that scene to work a little bit more.
Yeah. Oh, and
Um,
Rocket should have killed the High Evolutionary at the end. I know, like he probably blows up in the ship, but you don't really see that happen.
yeah,
Um, this he killed all his friends. He blew up a planet the size and look of Earth. Just kill the dude.
hmm.
Kill him. Maybe that says something about me. But I'm just like, yeah, kill the High Evolutionary. Like, screw your semi restrictive rules, because definitely people die through this. But
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
did but I don't know. I'm picking at very small things here. For the most part, yeah, it was
No, I know what
bloody
you mean.
good.
You kind of just like you overstep those things because the journey you've had is so kind of enjoyable. I really enjoyed Nebula this time around too.
Yeah, yeah,
Um I Nebula I've always enjoyed Karen Gillan in this role. I think she does it really really well. I think
yep.
she completely loses herself in this character and you forget that it is Karen Gillan. But
Mm-hmm.
I think this time around that Nebula was just given that extra layer of depth and that sort of emotion that
Yeah.
she was kind of missing from other films. And, and at the end of the movie, I mean, it is so wrought and so manipulative when they're playing. It ends with a big party scene at the end where
Mm.
it's all they play Dog Days or Over from Florence and the Machine, and it's really sweet. And we see like Nebula actually like laugh and smile for the first time, and
Yeah.
that was like I kind of art really melted me. Um, I just kind of see all these. God, it is like a really like it's I find this more powerful than even saying goodbye to half of the cast in Infinity War. I thought this was just like such a sweet goodbye, and like yeah, okay, yeah, maybe we won't see these people ever again.
Mm.
Obviously post credit scene, we find out that we're going to see Peter Quill again, obviously. But if this is a way to say goodbye to them, then yeah, they've nailed it. I was completely like glued to my seat at the end of it. I'm so
Yeah.
it's so sad
I
to see these
I
people go.
I 100% agree. 100% agree. Like not being able to see this team in its current form again, probably is they'll all
Yeah,
have their separate things and come back in different ways, I'm sure. But yeah, without the very kind of good hands of James Gunn, yeah,
and
it's not going to be the same. So I agree with everything you said, especially Nebula, who I think has one of the best character arcs in all the of all the Marvel films that actually works across movies. Like she's a
yeah,
full blown villain in the first film, and then through the second and Infinity War and Endgame, and now this one, I think is the most kind of interesting turn of a character that we've seen in some of these films.
yeah. No, she grows and she learns that being hard in the exterior isn't really there's strength beyond that, and Drax is kind of like her counterpoint to that, where she can kind of really recognize his strength as a member of the team isn't necessarily what traditionally she would have classified as a useful skill. So that's really cool. I'm sad to see Mantis go for good though, because I feel like I really enjoyed Palm Clemente in that role, and I feel like we could have. I
Um,
would have liked more. No, I would have liked more of her.
no, no, I'm not
Um,
saying as in like I just she's not gone.
no,
She's not
that's
gone.
nobody's ever gone these things, right?
No, she'll
But
pop up again, and she'll pop up again riding those three alien things. Like like she'll be back. She is great.
she is
I
great.
agree. Her and Drax comedy duo, just incredibly funny.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think we kind of love Guardians 3, and I think this couldn't have came at a better time. In a way, it's kind of bad in a way, because if we're going to get continuing the other quality that we've gotten from this phase, if that continues after this, and this was just a one off because it was helmed by James Gunn and he was given the freedom that he was able uh, to inject here, I think this is just let the machine go on for longer. In a way, if we're going to get a lower quality of films after this, I'd be a bit disappointed, because it's the first Marvel film in a while that actually looks nice as well.
Yeah,
I would
yeah.
say it
And
didn't
the
look like
effects are good.
the effects are good. It looks
Yeah,
like it looks like it came off the back of the budget of the Endgame or Infinity War. It looks like a nice looking Marvel big budget movie that you would expect to see. And
yeah.
I can't say the same for Thor: Love and Thunder, and I know you really liked Wakanda Forever and enjoyed that film, but I just thought the special effects and have been really, really lacking recently.
There's some ending stuff in Wakanda Forever on the boat, which I would agree with. I think
The
Wakanda
water
Forever.
stuff is kind of interesting.
This and Wakanda Forever seems to be like the good films out of the recent bunch, I would say. But I know you don't feel maybe as strongly about Wakanda Forever, but I do think I maybe need to rewatch it. But anyway, we'll I haven't. That's the other thing. I haven't rewatched any of these new Marvel films since Far From Home. I think
Yeah,
I
I
used to,
think.
I used to watch
Yeah,
them all at least twice, but yeah, Doctor Strange onwards. I've seen them once in the cinema. I haven't watched them again, but I could see myself watching this one again.
I could too, and
Yeah.
that's a big thing for me, because I'm usually like, I'll do a marathon of these like every couple of years or something, just to kind of
Mm.
refresh myself. But I won't like, when Guardians One came out, Vol One in 2014, I got that in 3D Blu-ray when I came out, and I watched it
Yeah.
like I spent a lot of nights watching it just in bed. I really enjoyed that movie,
Yeah.
and it felt like such a exciting. That came about 7 years into the Marvel machine, and that was kind of a real. I we use the term palate cleanser a lot now. We've used that on the podcast, but that actually did feel like at the time like something that the series needed.
Yeah.
Um, but it's so hard now. The thing is so wide open. It's so broad. This creature that they can't seem to wield, and it was just so. it was just like completely glass of fresh water whenever this movie came out the other night, and I got to sit down and actually enjoy a Marvel film again.
Yeah. I am worried it's a one off though, because I do
Oh,
think that James Gunn is such a good writer and director and they have given, well, it feels like they've given him a lot of freedom on these films
you were
that
saying,
maybe
yeah.
they don't give to everyone else. Because maybe they get a little bit nervous sometimes about some of their characters, and I don't think maybe they, at least at the start, weren't so nervous about these guys because they haven't got this huge following behind them. And yeah, uh, yeah, DC, very lucky to have him. I think it'll be really interesting to see what comes of that, which is currently a garbage fire. Hopefully, James Gunn can kind of put out the fire and make something from the ashes.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I haven't been like I haven't been racing to watch any of these DC trailers or related to the Flash recently. I know the discourse, the messy discourse around that
it's
film.
supposed to be very good, though.
Yeah, the reason why they're pushing it because apparently it screen tested really well. But I saw the trailer for the first time actually preluding to watching Vol 3 the other night in
Mm.
the cinema, and I just thought that thing looked. I'm interested to see where the good movie is because that thing looks messy.
Yeah, I mean, I think the trailers make it look better than most stuff that's come out of DC relatively recently,
Okay,
barring James Gunn's Suicide
I think
Squad, which I was a very big fan of.
I can't I don't know if I'll ever watch Black Adam, but I remember seeing the trailer a lot. It was on like every time I was going to the cinema as well, and I was like,
Yeah,
I just went on standby mode when that thing came on.
I'm looking forward to the Flash. I am looking forward to it, and the yeah, from what I'm hearing, it's supposed to be pretty good. So be interesting. It won't be long, and we'll be discussing that one, I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure.
That's Guardians 3, guys, and Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves. Both very good films in their own right. So go out and watch them.
Absolutely go out your way to see these. Again, Dungeons and Dragons, by the time you're listening to this podcast, I think you're only a couple of days from it being on digital release, so you can catch up with it on there. It is a good cinema release, though. It's good to watch on a big screen if you can still find the time to do that. But yeah, Guardians Vol 3, go see it as soon as you can because, it's worth seeing in a big crowd of people because you can feel the energy and the emotion in the room. But I imagine if you've heard this far already, you've already seen it. So no, we are really big fans of both these movies, and yeah, it might be two blockbuster films I might actually own one day, which is a change.
Well, that's it for this episode of the Film Angle, guys. Join us next week, and we will be discussing some more movies. Chris, you going to catch up with Celine and Julie go boating?
I am going to watch that tomorrow. I've got a free afternoon.
Enjoy. I will discuss it next week with you. My next one is Santantango.
That's a pretty short one. Pretty easy watch. Stick it on, pot of coffee. By the time you finish the coffee, you're done.
Yeah, not sure if that one's going to be this weekend. That might have to be the week after. We'll see how
It'll
it
be the
goes.
next 10 weekends.
Find out.
Although I heard that one split up into 12. I read on Reddit that it's split up into 12 chapters. So
Yes, but I
you,
I also saw on Reddit that most people were saying if you can't find time to watch it over the course of a day, then you probably shouldn't watch it. So I was like, no, I don't know.
really, I don't know. That sounds like elitist talk there. We'll see.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see. I'll figure it out. Anyway, that's behind the scenes of the Film Angle for you. This is the end of the Film Angle. Go like us on TikTok and Instagram and tell all your friends and family about us. We're on all the podcast places, your Googles, your Spotifys, your Apples. And we'll see you next week. I'm Alex.
And I'm Chris.
This is the Film Angle. Good night.
See you later.